Welcome to Listen Here, the audiobook podcast where we bring you chapter listens of our much-loved audiobooks and sometimes special guest appearances. Billy Stanley, Elvis Presley's stepbrother, shares the untold story of the iconic singer's Christian faith, its deep influence on his music, films, relationships, commitment to his family and fans, and his love for the gospel. From the day Billy Stanley arrived at Graceland and received a bear hug from the king of rock and roll to the last conversation they ever had, one thing stayed the same: Elvis's passion for sharing God's love with as many people as he could. In The Faith of Elvis, Billy illuminates Elvis's Christian journey, from the notes Elvis made in his beloved Bible to his struggles with sin as his fame increased, to his remarkable generosity towards fans and movie stars alike. Through this first-hand account, you'll find touching family stories of the Elvis that pop culture doesn't know, a keen look into how Elvis intricately wove his faith into every part of his life, insights into the ups and downs the four brothers experienced while at home and on the road together, and examples of Elvis's profound influence on others, from those closest to him to his cherished fans, and ultimately, here you will find your own faith strengthened and your heart turned more toward heaven, or as Elvis would say, toward the only true king. In The Faith of Elvis, Billy gives his first-hand accounts of Elvis's life and abiding belief in Jesus and heaven, which has been kept from the public until now. Though the king of rock and roll struggled with addiction and with his notorious Playboy image, Billy reveals that the true Elvis was deeply committed to ensuring his family and his fans knew the true king, Jesus Christ. Let's hear an exclusive sneak peek of The Faith of Elvis. Faith Gateway is an online community for readers to discover top Christian books and engage with their favorite Christian authors. They bring together content in many different forms, from daily blog posts to book excerpts, daily devotionals, free downloads, videos, giveaways, contests, free online Bible studies, and more. Faith Gateway is brought to you by HarperCollins Christian Publishing, which publishes works from some of the most beloved and most popular Christian authors in the world today. Faith Gateway provides unique opportunities to connect with those authors and their books as you seek answers to your biggest spiritual questions. Whether you are exploring Christianity or involved in full-time Christian ministry, Faith Gateway has the best resources to meet you where you are today and help you get to the next level in your spiritual journey. Faith Gateway is giving Listen Here listeners 15% off their first order with promo code LISTEN. Visit faithgateway.com to shop the store, sign up for daily devotionals, or join the latest free online Bible study. That's faithgateway.com and promo code LISTEN to receive 15% off your first order.
Introduction. Elvis is alive. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. How do I know he's alive? Because I've seen him. As I watched Elvis's casket being placed into a mausoleum in 1977, I felt an overwhelming grief, assuming I would never see him again. But I did see him. The first time was in a dream 10 years later. Drugs and bad decisions had brought me to the lowest point in my life, and the words he spoke changed my life forever. I saw Elvis a second time in 2018, 41 years after he died. I suffered a major heart attack and was clinically dead for 10 minutes, but it was enough time to see Elvis in a vision. We talked briefly, and he shared his final message with me. Tell all of my family, friends, and fans I love them, and I'll see them when they get here. This book is not just my attempt to share the message Elvis gave to me. I also want to reveal the true story of a great man. Behind the glitz and glamour, beyond the movies and millions of records sold, is a man driven by his faith in God. I didn't know him as a fan, a Hollywood producer, or the countless number of people who wanted a piece of him. I knew him as a brother. I want you to see the man who gave so much of himself, almost too much. A man who thought it was better to give than to receive. a man dedicated to protecting his younger brothers and sharing the love of Jesus with each of us. This is a story of faith, hope, and love. It is a story only a brother can tell. I was 7 years old when my mother, Dee, brought me and my 2 younger brothers to live at Graceland in 1960. Although my brother Ricky and I were born the same year in 1953, I was older than him for 11 months out of the year. I was born in January and he was born in December. My brother David was 2 years younger. As for my mother, she was still young in years but long in life experience. As a military wife who had moved around a lot, she was ready to settle down. My mother and father were separated, but their divorce was not finalized. She would go on to marry Elvis's father, Vernon, a few months after we moved in with the Presley family. None of us had any idea how our lives were about to change. Moments after we arrived at Graceland, the man the world knew as the King scooped me and my brothers up in his arms and exclaimed, "Daddy, I always wanted a little brother. Now I've got 3." These were some of the first words I ever heard Elvis speak. He would never call us stepbrothers. From that moment forward, we were simply his brothers. We were a family. We were only children when we arrived, pulled into a world the 3 of us could never have imagined. Elvis instantly stepped in as any older brother would and cared for us. Through the years, countless people came in and out of Elvis's life, but we were there through it all, on the inside, with the real Elvis. He became our friend, mentor, guide, teacher, and cheerleader. No one had more impact on me and my brothers' lives. For as long as I can remember, Elvis used the same Bible, which went with him everywhere. When I was finally old enough to work for him, I was in charge of that Bible. I made sure the Bible made it to every hotel room where he stayed. I placed it neatly on his bedside table where he wanted it to be waiting for him before and after his sold-out performances. For years, when he would call me to his room, Elvis would be holding his Bible in his hands when I arrived. It was well worn, filled with his own notes and highlights. I was a young man thrust into a world that was constantly under the spotlight, and he entrusted me with that Bible to guard and ensure it was everywhere he went. In those private moments when he spent time with his Bible, I saw the real Elvis, a man rooted in faith. From the day we met until our last conversation, he shared that faith with me. It began with a special bedtime prayer our first night at Graceland and ended just 2 days before his death in a conversation about Jesus, love, and forgiveness. In the 17 years between, I was a first-hand witness to his faith in Jesus and love for everyone. Elvis wasn't perfect. Just like the rest of us who walk this earth, he was broken. Even so, Elvis knew he was blessed, and he loved to give to others. He extended the same generosity to everyone. His message was always clear: treat everyone the same. Look at their hearts and souls, how they treat you. Even if they treat you badly, something could be going on in their lives at the time. So you just look at them and say, "I forgive you," and go on. Elvis believed in love and wanted that for me and my brothers more than anything. He wanted that for everyone. He lived it every day and found a way to share it with the world through his life and music. There came a time in Elvis's career when he began including a gospel set in his show. Thousands of adoring fans seeking the thrill of his signature music were introduced to his version of gospel songs and hymns. This was his testimony. He saw his music as a way not just to make a living, but to change lives. He saw it as a ministry. Elvis knew he couldn't perform miracles, but miracles happened through the power of his music. He was spreading the good news with the gift God gave him, his voice. The stage was his pulpit. The screaming fans were his congregation, and it was magical. Fans would come up to us talking about how the gospel set made them believe again. They came to see the King, but left knowing another King, the one who could save them. This was his legacy. Elvis released 24 albums in different genres over his career, but he only won Grammy Awards for his gospel music. If you listen to his recordings of gospel songs, you can hear there is something different, something more soulful about those recordings. The reason is because those songs contained a truth that reached more deeply into Elvis's soul than anything else. His favorite Bible verse was John 3:16, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." That is what Elvis wanted more than anything, for people to know God and come to faith in Jesus. Elvis sensed that his time on earth was limited. Shortly before his death, he sat down with the three of us, his brothers. He said, "If anything happens to me, if I die, there's only three people in this world who can truly tell my story from the right perspective. As my brothers, you're the only ones who can do that." Now it's time to carry that torch, to see through the wishes of the king of rock and roll. Why another Elvis book among the countless others that have been written? Because there is a side of Elvis that has not been explored until now, his faith. I told the story of my life with Elvis in my previous book, Elvis, My Brother. Now I'm ready to share my first-hand perspective of Elvis's true motivation, to share God's love through his life and music. The book is mostly chronological, but not strictly so, since each chapter focuses on a specific topic related to Elvis's faith. Many of the chapters focus on themes directly related to notes and reminders Elvis wrote in his Bible. Sharp-eyed Elvis fans will notice that most of the chapter titles are gospel songs recorded by Elvis. The book is divided into three parts, based on the trifecta of faith, hope, and love, from 1 Corinthians 13:13. Part 1, Faith Like a Child, explores my early days with Elvis when he was helping my faith develop. In many ways, he was a big kid at heart. These chapters focus on topics such as his family, his music, and his relationship with his fans, how he mentored me and my brothers, and how he dealt with fame. Part 2, The Hope of His Calling, explores the conflicts, opportunities, and stories related to different areas of Elvis's life as his faith was put to the test. These chapters include topics such as his support of racial equality, his love of cars, his struggle to transition from movies back to concerts, and his impromptu visit with President Nixon. Part 3, The Greatest of These is Love, takes us to even greater depths of Elvis's faith. You will hear stories about his use of gospel music in concerts, his struggle with fame, and his suspicions that he might die young. You will also get first-hand accounts of my spiritual encounters with Elvis since his death. The story of Elvis isn't just a story of music or fame. It is a story reminding the world that we are all worthy of redemption and grace. And what better place for three young boys to learn that lesson than in a place called Graceland? Part 1, Faith Like a Child. Chapter 1, Mansion Over the Hilltop. I remember the first time I heard the name Elvis Presley. We were sitting around the dinner table, and my father nonchalantly said, "Private Presley checked in today." You'd have thought he was reciting a random fact he'd heard on the news instead of the earth-shaking information it was to most Americans. It was 1959, and we were living in Germany, where my father, Bill, was stationed. Elvis was stationed at the same base, and my father and Elvis's father, Vernon, had become friends. My father was a career sergeant, and the Army was his life. He was not a pleasant person to be around, and neither me nor my brothers had much of a relationship with him. According to my mother, my father was not happy unless there was a war. My father was also an alcoholic who had turned to the bottle to manage his pain. I remember him telling me years later, "Billy, nobody ever survives war. I don't care if they come home or not." My father may have come home from the war, but he did not emotionally survive, especially after seeing his best friend's head get blown off. He and my mother became more distant over time, especially when Vernon entered the picture. Vernon's wife, Gladys, had died the year before. I saw Vernon a few times at our house in Germany, and he and my mother would talk on the phone quite a bit when my father was gone. When my father was home, he would go out with Vernon, and sometimes my mom would join them. Odd as it sounds, pretty soon my father asked Vernon to take her out because he couldn't do it. As a widower, Vernon was drawn to my mother's energy and charm. She was a petite blonde with blue eyes and excellent cooking skills. He started seeing my mom regularly and said that he wanted to marry her. By that point, my parents had already decided to get a divorce. That was no surprise because their arguments had gotten worse than usual, especially since Vernon had entered the picture. It was just a matter of time until Vernon would become our stepfather. Elvis was a worldwide sensation by this time. However, Vernon was the one who was much more prominent in my life when we lived in Germany. He would mention things like, "I've got a son named Elvis." It was never, "I've got a son who is a famous rock and roll musician," or "he's a movie star." Before meeting Elvis, I never thought of him as being anyone other than Vernon's son. Vernon knew that Elvis was going to come back to the States in 1960 after his Army commitment was finished. As a result, he and my mother wanted to get us kids back here before then and return to Germany to get the divorce finalized since my father was remaining there. Vernon took us to the airport in his car, and there was no discussion of what was going on. Kids back then were seen but not heard, so we just sat there and didn't ask questions. My main memory from the airport was that it looked like something out of Casablanca in the final scene when Ingrid Bergman is about to get on the plane. It was a foggy German night, and I remember walking up the airplane steps. When I got to the top, I turned around to look, and there were two men, Vernon and my father. My life was changing right before my eyes. One man was coming into the picture, and the other was going out. My mother needed to arrange temporary housing for us boys for a few months since she didn't own a residence in the States. The best she could do was arrange for us to stay with our Aunt Peggy. However, she only had a trailer and already had her two teenagers living with her. We only stayed there about a month. Vernon located a boarding school and arranged for our stay there. When we arrived, the staff showed us all around and told us how great it would be. They even took us for a boat ride to make it seem like a happy place. But as soon as Vernon and my mother left to head back to Germany, things got dark pretty fast. The head mistress took us into our room and pointed out, "That's where you'll be sleeping." She told us not to ask any questions and just stay in line. When the staff corrected us, they never whipped us, but instead put Tabasco sauce on our tongues. That happened to me a lot. At the time it burned, but over the years I came to enjoy Tabasco. Crazy, huh? During Halloween, I remember the older kids saying, "You younger kids stay inside and we'll come and get you later." I thought that was kind of strange, but assumed maybe that was the way they did it there. I was lying in my bed, which just happened to be right next to a window with blinds. I pulled the blinds up and looked outside. I could see all the older kids dressed up in their costumes getting into cars. They never came back to take us, but that's what it was like there. The older kids got everything, and we didn't get anything. Looking back on it now, I understand that our mother was doing the best with what she had. She knew the boarding school was a temporary arrangement and that we had a much better life ahead if we could just be patient. She had no idea that the dog and pony show put on by the staff when we arrived was the complete opposite of what it was actually like. From our perspective as kids, we felt like our mother had abandoned us. We got a phone call every now and then. "I'll come pick you boys up as soon as I can get there." But that was it. This went on for 4 or 5 months. We wondered if we had done something wrong. The real kicker came during the Christmas season. We saw all the other kids leaving with their families for the holidays, but not us. There was only one other kid who was left there for Christmas. Nobody came to pick us up, take us home, or bring any gifts. We didn't understand what was happening or what a divorce was. All we knew was that we were alone. At age 6, I didn't know anything about prayer, but that's when I said my first one there at the boarding school. I cried, "Please, Lord, get us out of here. What did we do to deserve this?" I had no way of knowing that around the same time, Elvis was finishing his service in the Army. My mother traveled back to the States with him and took the train to Memphis. One day she called us at the school and told us she would pick us up in a few days to take us to our new home. We We were excited yet apprehensive following the last several months. Last time we were promised a sleepaway camp, and look how that turned out. We packed up our few belongings with no idea what to expect. The morning we were to be picked up, the staff had us dress up in our best clothes. When our mother arrived, we walked outside and saw a brand new shiny black Lincoln Continental. It was the biggest car I had ever seen in my life. "Where's Dad?" David asked Mom. "You boys know Vernon. He is going to be your new father." We didn't understand what was happening, but we did know one thing: we couldn't get out of there fast enough. We piled into the back seat and headed toward our new home in Memphis. It was a chilly night in March 1960 when our Lincoln pulled up to the wrought iron gates of Graceland. My two younger brothers and I had fallen asleep on the way. Mom was excitedly reaching into the back seat telling us, wake up, boys, this is your new home." Vernon honked the horn, and the magical gates slowly opened to our new life. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief as I stared wide-eyed through the windshield. We rolled gently by giant musical notes and the silhouette of a man playing guitar built into the gates. The house was lit up from the outside. It looked like a castle straight out of a Disney movie. My world instantly turned from black and white into a Technicolor dream brighter and more beautiful than anything I had seen on television. "Does a king live here?" I asked. "Some people say he's a king," Vernon replied. I couldn't wrap my mind around the size of the house. My father was in the military, and we were accustomed to small apartments. A big home to us meant one that had 2 or 3 bedrooms. Pulling into the driveway at Graceland, I realized this castle would be my new home, and it definitely had more than 3 bedrooms. As soon as the car stopped, me and my brothers spilled out into the driveway. We were led through the back door of the house and instantly embraced by Alberta, one of the maids at Graceland. A large, loving black woman who immediately made us feel welcomed and important. She had a smile that could light up a room. When she hugged you, it made everything disappear. She was the first person we met, and with a big smile on her face, she said, "I'm going to treat these boys like my own." Alberta told us that Elvis was waiting for us downstairs playing pool. We nervously descended the stairs and entered an unknown, dimly lit, smoky room with a group of people crowded around a pool table. We stood there at the entrance, unsure if we should approach the table. It grew quiet, and then a deep voice with an unmistakable Southern accent said, "8-ball corner pocket." I heard the sound of the ball striking and the soft thud of the 8-ball landing home. The crowd cheered and applauded. Someone hollered, "Nice shot, E." Almost on cue, the crowd parted like the seas and turned to us. There at the other end stood Elvis. It seemed as if a spotlight shone on him, and with a pool cue in hand, eyes fixed on us, his face lit up as he set down his cue and walked across the room. Looking down at the 3 of us, he asked, "What do we have here, Daddy?" Vernon smiled and held his hand out as if presenting us. "These are your new brothers, Elvis." Without waiting to even hear his father finish his presentation, Elvis leaned down and scooped all 3 of us up in his arms. I could feel the love coming from him. He had been expecting us. He knew we were scared and overwhelmed. I felt protected for the first time in many months. While still squeezing the 3 of us, he said, "Daddy, I always wanted a little brother, and now I have 3. In the span of 12 hours, we had gone from being seemingly abandoned to the loving embrace of Elvis, safely inside the walls of the castle known as Graceland. We were in uncharted territory and had no idea what to expect. But from the moment we encountered Alberta, it felt like home. Elvis turned to Vernon. "Daddy, I'm sure you and Dee are tired from the trip. Why don't you guys do what you want to do, and I'll tuck in the boys?" Vernon agreed, and the crowd left us alone in the pool room with our new big brother. Elvis asked us all kinds of questions about what kind of toys we liked and what we were interested in. After a couple of hours, he led us upstairs to get ready for bed. We were excited to be in our new home with our new older brother and quickly got our pajamas on and brushed our teeth. Elvis stood there smiling and laughing at us. "Are you ready to go to bed?" Elvis asked. "Yep." "Haven't you forgotten something?" "We already brushed our teeth." "No, you forgot to say your prayers." The three of us had only ever said prayers at mealtime, so this was foreign to us. But we followed our big brother's lead, knelt with him at the end of the bed, and folded our hands in prayer. Elvis spoke this prayer on our first night. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for our many blessings. I want to thank you for bringing these three little boys into my life. I promise to love and protect them for the rest of my life. I looked at him as he finished his prayer and was in awe of this amazing man. He was like no one I had ever met. Nobody had ever said a prayer like that for us before. I reached up and put my hand on his back. He looked down and a tear came to his eye. He picked us up one at a time, tossed us in bed, and gave us each a kiss on the cheek. I fell asleep that night in wonder. The next morning we were awakened by Elvis excitedly running around the room yelling at us to get up. We've got to go outside. We've got to go outside. I tried to shake off the sleepiness and locate my clothes. Elvis yelled, "No time for that." He scooped up David and threw him over his shoulders, grabbed Ricky and me, and ran us outside to the backyard. What we found in the yard was the most amazing sight my 7-year-old eyes had ever seen. We stood in awe of a yard full of all the toys you could possibly imagine. Bikes, cars, balls, you name it. 3 of each one. I thought to myself, this guy is Santa Claus. It turned out that after he put us to bed the night before, Elvis had stores in Memphis open up just for him. He went and bought all those toys based on the answers we had given him while hanging out around the pool table. I was frozen, and so were Ricky and David. I said, "Whose are those?" Elvis said, "They're yours." "Can we play with them?" "Yes, they're yours. You can go play with them." And we did. We ran through the yard exploring all the new amazing toys. Elvis ran with us, horsing around and helping when necessary. I gravitated to one of the bikes. It had training wheels on it, but I let him know I didn't need them. Someone grabbed him a wrench, and he started to take them off, but I jumped in to show him I could do it myself. "Oh, a mechanic too?" Elvis said, laughing. I removed the training wheels and tried to swing my leg over the seat. It was too high and a little tough to get going on the grass in the backyard at Graceland, so Elvis held the seat while I mounted the bike. He ran behind me as I pedaled up to speed. We spent the rest of the day playing in the yard. As the day turned to night and the hours passed, we eventually went back inside and got dressed. Elvis pulled me aside and said, "Now I want to show you some of my toys." He led me to the garage. I couldn't believe his collection of cars. I recognized the black 4-door Lincoln Continental we had traveled in the day before. There was also his iconic 1955 pink Cadillac Fleetwood and a white 2-door Lincoln Continental Mark II, and of course his Harley-Davidson motorcycle. But the vehicles that interested me most were 2 racing go-karts. My eyes opened wide, and Elvis helped me sit in one of them to try it out. He said, "One day I'll teach you how to drive it." I got out of the go-kart and we walked to the end of the line of parked vehicles where I saw one more car. However, this one wasn't a full-sized automobile or a go-kart. It was a smaller, red, battery-operated car. I asked who it belonged to, and he explained that it was just for me. I was so excited I could hardly stand it. I asked if I could sit in it. Elvis was laughing as he said again that the car was mine. He sat me in the car and we started talking. I said how excited I was to finally learn how to drive. He told me that he was going to be the one to teach me how to drive. He explained, "Billy, the right pedal makes it go. The left pedal makes it stop." Elvis also said that eventually he would teach me how to race cars. As a 7-year-old, this was music to my ears. Those first 24 hours at Graceland were the things dreams are made of. Not because we had arrived at a house that seemed as large as a castle or had been given more toys than we'd ever seen at one time. It was because we felt abundant love. We knew we were protected. As a person of faith, it's easy to talk the talk instead of walking the walk. But deeds are more powerful than words. Elvis didn't just sing about the gospel, he lived it. James chapter 1, verses 22 through 24 says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. When I read the Bible, I see a God of love. Elvis was a living, breathing example of God's love. We didn't know Elvis as the world knew him. The day before, he had been a stranger to us. We had no idea how famous he was or that he was a movie star. He was just a man who welcomed us into his home and treated us like his own kids. He prayed with us, played with us, and would provide for us and protect us. Elvis sang an old gospel song about a mansion over the hilltop. He wasn't kidding. It wasn't just a home that he bought, and it wasn't just the place I grew up in as a kid. It's also the one God has waiting for us in heaven.
Thank you for spending time with us, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen Here. Check back next week for more audiobook samples and maybe a special guest or two. And follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us on Instagram and TikTok at Listen Here Podcast. And visit our website, listenhearepodcast.com, for more information or to find the books we've talked about.